need adorned.
Welcome artists to the ultimate throwback journey in our 3-part series, Hairspray, Dress Tutorial, Recreate Tracy's Look. Get ready to dive into the vibrant world of Hairspray as we embark on an epic DIY adventure together. This series isn't just for our college class, it's for all artists, DIYers, and cosplayers out there on YouTube craving some retro magic. In part 1, we're laying the groundwork for your transformation into Tracy Turnblad. Join us as we dive into the nitty-gritty of Simplicity pattern S9104, revealing the secrets of capturing Tracy's iconic style. From mastering the patterns to unleashing your creativity, this episode sets the stage for an unforgettable journey. Get ready to unleash your inner desire because we're just getting started. Stay tuned as part 2 and 3, where we dive into the construction process and add those finishing touches that will make your Tracy transformation shine. Grab your sewing kit and buckle up because this is one ride you won't want to miss. Let's turn back time and bring Tracy's style into the 21st century, one stitch at a time. First things first, let's go ahead and gather our materials. You will need a Simplicity pattern S9104, fabric shears, thread snips, see-through plastic ruler, dressmaker's tape measure, muslin, dressmaker's pins, hand needle, beeswax, seam ripper, thimble, permanent marker, pencil or pen, tailor's chalk, iron and ironing board, and distilled water. Step 1. Iron your fabric. Now, I like to use distilled water because tap water and other waters that have minerals in them leave mineral and gunk deposits. With distilled water, it's just pure H2O and it doesn't leave any weird rings, except this one is, So this is a sign that your iron just died. Go to Walmart and go buy a new one. Oh, here we are, and we're back. So here is the front of our pattern. We will be doing view B here with the tie. On the back is where you can find your sizing, how much fabric you need, what types of notions, what are the other views. There's a lot of information on the back. Please take a moment to look at it because it tells you everything you need to know. So step 2, open your pattern and find all your pattern pieces. This is where you're going to find your guide sheet, which is the non-tissue papered piece of paper inside of your paper pattern. So many P words. So once again, we're doing view B. Open up your pattern and find the start of the guide sheet, which will tell you which pattern pieces go to which view. Just a note, you can use paper scissors or fabric scissors to cut out your tissue paper pattern. It's believed that it will not dull your fabric shears. I just kind of tend to use my general craft scissors for the bulk of it, and then I don't really worry about my fabric shears cutting any of the tissue paper when I get into the actual cutting out of my pattern. Please note that pattern number 6 is too small to have the cutting instructions inside the pattern, so please keep these to the side as a reference. As I find all of my pieces, I like to just make little tick marks as I go. It just helps my brain not be like, wait, did I get number 4? Did I get number 5? No. I'm also dyslexic, so it just is like, is this a 4? Is this a 5? It just is my little methodology. Step 3, lay out your largest pattern piece first. This is really important because if you don't, you might end up inadvertently eating up precious fabric space that you will need later. Step 4, true up your pattern. Truing up your pattern is the process of taking your dressmaker tape measure. You find the straight of grain line, which is that arrow on your pattern. Place your tape measure on the arrow and then find the edge of your fabric. We are assuming that the edge of your fabric is straight, especially because I am on the folded side. Measure down. Remember that number. I think this ended up being 26 and a quarter. So then I need to find that same measurement at the other end of the arrow. Once I know they're even, I'm going to pin in place and then move on to pinning the rest of my pattern piece down. Truing up is something that you really get into as you get deeper into costuming and pattern making in general. Draping and drafting is all about truing everything up multiple ways. So let's go ahead and take a look at our pattern and learn how to read it. So at first it says simplicity. It gives us the pattern number. What piece is this? It's the front. It tells you the front in multiple languages. This front is for view A, B, C, and D. How many to cut? We need to cut one on fold. The fold is indicated by this arrow at the edge that goes all the way down and forms like a half box. Here is the waistline here, as well as showing all of our dart lines that go all the way to the bottom. See here, this other end of the arrow, that is the other side of our, I'm gonna go up again. So this marking, that shows us that this is supposed to be on fold. I'm simply zooming in so you can see all of the little dots that we're going to have to mark later, as well as this waistline up here. So for shorties like me, this pattern is saying, if you're a little short, you can take this line and match it to the straight line, and that will give you a shorter waist. And then down here at the bottom, it's kind of hard to see, but I wanted to zoom in again to show you that all of these lines are connected all the way down. So you're gonna mark this pattern piece from the top to the bottom. Oh, here's a better image of the waistline. So it tells you how much to go up per size on this pattern. That's kind of the reason why I like using commercial patterns to teach sewing, because it just gives you so much information, but you still have to learn how to decode it. And then again, you can see the side bust dart on the front. And then as I make my way down to pattern 2, which is upside down because that's just the way it fit the best. Now, with pattern number 8, the tie is actually cut on the bias. All of the other pattern pieces are cut on the straight of grain. So fabric is made in a warp and weft, which is, think of like a graph axis, up and down, left and right. But this pattern is actually going to go the diagonal way. But the way that we find this is just like finding any other straight of grain. I'm going to take my arrow piece, or the arrow line, as you can see, and make it parallel. I know, another math term. There's so much math in sewing. Who knew there was so much math in sewing? But it's okay. It's mostly geometry math. It's the fun math. Find your parallel lines. So the edge of the fabric is parallel to my straight of grain line, and then I'm going to measure. I think this one came out like 10.5. Maybe the camera will kind of zoom in a little bit. 10.5 on each one. I know that it's a really short line, but it's very important that you still measure one end of the line to the other end of the line, because you really need to capture that bias so that the collar will stretch around the neck. And then this piece number 5 is also cut on the fold, as indicated by our lovely squared triangles. Pattern 6 is not cut on the fold, but I am going to place it on the fold because that just makes the most sense for my arm length and trying to preserve as much fabric as I can. I could do it on the other side, but then I'd have to reach over my fabric, and that's just not going to happen. So I pin it all down, and then, so even though the sleeve is only a half sleeve, it's a short sleeve, we're not doing the long sleeve version, I still wanted to go ahead and just true up the pattern from one end of the arrow to the other end, just to make sure that it is straight. It is really, really important that you learn these essential skills of how to lay out your pattern, because it just gets more complicated from here. Step 5. Then once trued up, go ahead and pin all your pieces down. I kind of true and then pin, true and pin. That's sort of just like the natural rhythm. But in terms of going step by step, that is the proper step order. I just have a very small table, and many of you are probably working in very small spaces and will have to go. But it is important that you lay out all of your pieces before you cut them out. And again, check all of your pattern pieces before cutting anything. Step 6. cut out pattern pieces, including the triangles. This is quite a bit sped up. I cut out very, very slowly. I think I have made every single mistake that you could make, and I just would prefer to go slow, a little methodical, make sure that I cut out all my triangles. I'm paying attention. I'm not getting little fabric bubbles or anything's getting bunched up, because that one little bump, you're like, oh, I'll just cut through it. You could be cutting a wrinkle or cutting into your fabric. You might need that little extra piece. It just is not a good idea. It's better to go slow and methodical and pay attention to all the little bitty details, because sewing is already hard enough and cutting out is a skill amongst itself. In our industry, there are people that are cutter drapers and first hands do not cut. They do not drape. There are people who spend a career just doing what we're doing in this step number 6. So here's just a close-up of me cutting out the triangles. Step 7, label all of your muslin pieces. This will help keep track of which piece goes where when constructing your garment. Step 8, mark any special markings indicated on the pattern. These can be circles or squares. In this pattern, I'm pretty sure they are all circles. I don't remember any squares, but it could be a number of different things. Just have to remember what they mean. And you can always go back to the guide sheet. There's a key, there's little things in there that will let you know what the pattern maker was trying to tell you. Step 9, mark your darts center, side, and shoulder. Marking the darts is really important that you, once again, take your time and follow the lines, because even though those dots are very close and it's like, oh, well, if I get a size 18 or size 20, it does actually impact your end results. Every little inch, every quarter of an inch, every eighth of an inch is taking the fabric from somewhere. And again, you want your pattern to be even, because you want your left and the right of the body to be even. It's when we get into the actual alteration of a garment, that's why this is a mock-up made out of fabric that is something that we don't really care about. Once we get into the alterations, that's where we really get to see, like, okay, so their body curves a little to the left, a little to the right, a little front, a little back. But for now, we want a balanced, even mock-up, so that way when we get into the fitting process, we know, okay, so what's pulling to the left or right is the body, and not that our pattern and the markings and the sewing and every little piece of this was actually a tiny bit off, leading to one side of our garment not lining up with the other side of the garment. 10, mark the 5/8 seam allowance on all muslin pieces. Typically speaking, commercial patterns are always in 5/8. How do we find 5/8? It is 1/8 on the other side of your 1/2 inch line. I hope that helps. I'm only showing the sleeve because this is the piece that most people kind of struggle with and their brain kind of trips over because it's all curves. It's concave and convex curves, but I promise you, if you just go slow and go inch by inch, beautiful lines. And all of our pattern pieces are a combination of convex and concave curves because that is how the human body is formed. Well, that concludes today's video. Stay tuned for part 2 and 3. We'll be out soon.
Water-free Adorn.